I hope you're all back now. So to kickstart the next keynote panel, can I ask the team to showcase the video to lay the ground for the panel on how can nature-based solutions protect climate, biodiversity, and people? So we'll start with a quick video now.
From a single partnership with a Ugandan village 17 years ago, Cotton On Foundation have built a model that empowers thousands of young people around the globe with a holistic education. Last financial year, we supported over 14,000 students across 24 schools in Uganda, South Africa, and Thailand. We served 4.4 million meals, had 37,000 visits to our supported healthcare centres, 392 teachers supported with training, and over 350 students supported with scholarships to further education. As two of the biggest challenges facing young people and their futures today, protecting the environment and supporting mental health are vital to creating a world where everyone can thrive. This year, we're continuing our partnership with Citizens of the Reef, who are working to protect, preserve, and restore the Great Barrier Reef. In our mission to protect and preserve the Earth's natural assets, we've raised funds to plant 1 million trees across 17 locations in 11 countries. We've distributed 10 million Australian dollars to partners and projects supporting youth mental health and wellbeing all around the world. We announced the recipients of the Kindness in Community Fund grants in partnership with Born This Way Foundation. 65 organisations in 10 countries, impacting over 75,000 young people with accessible mental health support and resources.
Please welcome on stage Tim Diamond, General Manager, Cotton On Foundation. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here. WWF Earth Summit. Very privileged to be up here on this stage. I just want to say special mention to the previous panel. I love the open dialogue and the conversations around achieving goals. This is what's absolutely needed. It's not a solo effort. It's great to hear what's working well, what isn't, so we can do better as businesses and as organisations around the world. A special thanks to Paul as well. Your words before, extremely powerful. I don't think I agreed to speak after you, but I'll do my best. You're a hard act to follow. And also, there was one thing that you did mention, Paul, a statement that was, is the world better off because you're in it? I think that's so powerful for us as individuals, powerful for us as companies. Ask ourselves that question, and that's definitely something that I'm going to leave here today asking myself and challenging myself and our business every single day. So thank you for that. My name is Tim Diamond. I'm the General Manager and co-founder of the Cotton On Foundation back in 2007. It's been an incredible journey. We do things a little bit differently in terms of fashion retailer. We are a registered NGO. We have a registered charity wherever we operate our work across the globe. And we are youth-inspired. We're funded predominantly by young people as well. Our work started in Uganda, a small rural area in Uganda called Manya, and continues today. We are driven by quality education for the last really 18 years. And some of the most disadvantaged areas around the world, when you think about access to education, Uganda, particularly rural Uganda, devastated by HIV and access to the basic necessities. We take our work to places like South Africa and work within townships, again, extreme disadvantage. And then probably more closely to here in Singapore, along the border of Myanmar and Thailand, where we work with Burmese migrants and really assess what does education look like for them as well. And of course, in Arnhem Land in Australia, where we ask the question, what does education look like for First Nations young people right across Australia as well? So we're inspired by education and really breaking down the barriers, finding a way forward, and that has carried on through to our work in the environmental space, and of course the mental health space. We get very close to our customer. So we try and understand what is really affecting young people today, and we ask the question. We talk to them, we engage with them, we have data that shows that they're worried. They're worried today for a number of things. They're worried about access to education, what the world looks like when they hopefully get meaningful employment. They're worried about mental health. They're worried about their own mental health, their friends' mental health, their family's mental health, and they've, of course, worried about the environment. And this comes in droves. We hear this all the time. We survey, we ask them questions, we talk to them. And with that, I think, is, I guess, a sense of helplessness. You know, even today, sharing some of the stats, there's that sense in you, what do you do? What do you do next? And you think about a young person scrolling through social media, they get that 24 hours a day, constantly. So at the Cotton On Foundation, we charge ourselves with this responsibility of action. We want to see action, we want to drive towards meaningful change. And my model, or our model behind us here is exactly, it's simple, but it's what we stick to every single day. We've been doing this for 18 years now, and it really starts off with amazing product. And I know that sounds really simple, but young people don't want to give $50, $100, $1,000. It's not achievable. So our average contribution is $2. And that's through a tote bag or mints or wipes or just incidental items that make an amazing difference across the globe. We have 1,300 stores around the world. We have 20,000 team members that lead the charge on this, and some of them are here today from our Singapore team. But every 2 seconds, a young person takes action through this model. Every 2 seconds, a contribution is made to the Cotton On Foundation. It's not about the money. It's about the engagement, the opportunity for a young person to take action on the things that they're concerned about. And collectively, we come together to make an impact, not only directly with community through education, but through amazing partners like WWF-Singapore and our work in Borneo on reforestation projects, or the reef that you saw before. It's tangible. They can see where the money's going, they can see the impact in front of them, and that helplessness gets changed into action and belief that we can make a difference. And that's where we challenge ourselves with the proof. We want to prove it to young people that they can be the change. So within any of our products, you see a QR code. You should be able to scan that code and see that reforestation project, see that grassroots mental health organisation that is supporting young people. And in turn, the flywheel keeps rolling. And for us, that's what it's all about. We believe that with hope and with connection to young people, we can see the change for a better tomorrow. So within the work that we do, there's no doubt that nature-based solutions is critical. Again, so tangible. It's all of us working together to get a great result. And I'm really, really excited to be a part of this panel discussion talking about those solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim, for setting the context for the next keynote panel, How Can Nature-Based Solutions Protect Climate, Biodiversity, and People? So join me in welcoming on stage Hua Yuning, Chief Executive Officer, National Parks Board. Professor Winston Chow, co-chair of the Working Group 2 for Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC as we call it, the 7th assessment cycle. And our moderator for the day probably needs no introduction, Professor Annie Ko, Professor Emeritus of Finance, Singapore Management University. Over to you, Professor Annie.
Thank you. Good morning. Hey, I need a better response than that. Good morning. There are 1,000 of you, right? Great. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm delighted to be here, wearing the hat as a newly minted board member of WWF-Singapore. Thank you. And when I signed up for the conference, I thought I'm here just to sit there, enjoy myself, and learn. And then Vivek gave me a phone call and said, we have a request from the team, how to say no when he lined up the whole team to make the request. So I'm here because I'm really passionate about the topic. And I think NbS, we need to demystify all the acronyms, yeah? So I have a great panel here, and I want to say a big thank you to Tim for sharing how young people, they are the ones moving the needle. So what we are going to do on this panel is very interactive. I do hope that you will send in questions, scan the QR code, because we want to start engaging you very quickly. But I thought the first round would be very important before we get to the how, to discuss the why. Why are we looking at nature-based solutions? And Tim, you didn't give us details, so I'm going to start with you first. All right, so why is it important for businesses to invest in NbS? And you know, what does it really do to support climate resilience, biodiversity, and community well-being?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a great question. I think obviously there's benefits from nature-based solutions in the work that actually happens in itself. So, but more specifically, I suppose, from a cotton on perspective, and I alluded to it before, but we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for a youth customer. And they clearly tell us that this is important for them. We actually go out with a survey every 2 years to millions of customers. Last survey, we got 20,000 respondents, and it was a 15-minute survey. So we actually get amazing data and amazing insight from young people. And we asked them a number of different questions, but the top three, or actually the number one question was, what impact do you want to see? Where do you want to see your money being dedicated? And the top three areas were education, I think because they know that's what we do. And 2 and 3 across the globe were environment and mental health. They might change here and there, 2 and 3, but it was a clear 1, 2, and 3 right across the globe. And so if we're not listening to our customer, we die as a business. And so it's very clear for us is the more we listen, the more we can actually impact the things that concern them most. And the outcomes we see are obvious benefit for environment and community. So that's the motivation from a business sense for us.
Very good. All right, so the customer's voice is critical, right? And then we'll come to some of those ground-up projects in a little while. I'm going to jump to you, Yunin. Yunin is an architect, all right? But before her current role, she's actually working at the URA. So I'm going to ask you a very simple question, Yunin. All right, why is NbS a key pillar for NParks? So everybody who comes to Singapore, they are amazed at our garden city. So why is that a key pillar, and how have they actually contributed to tackling climate change for us?
Yeah, thanks, Annie. Thanks for the question. Well, if you think back about it, actually greening is in the way the original nature-based solution that we have used in Singapore, right? We've been doing greening for more than 60 years. And greening creates all these co-benefits, provide shade, cooling for the environment, and all sorts of ecosystem services. So in a way, that's something that we've always reached out for, because it's not just Green Singapore, but also in a way branded Singapore in a very strong way in the early days when we were starting out in Singapore. The greening helped create a brand for Singapore, and our city in a garden, from garden city in garden, now city in nature, has really evolved. And in a way, that sophistication of using nature as a way to complement the other types of infrastructure engineering moves that we do helps us, in a way, bring different solutions together. Because when you do nature-based solution, and I want to come back to Tim's point about community engagement, actually that's a fantastic way to involve the community. If you talk about great infrastructure, you can't really get the community involved in putting together whether it's coastal defense, etc. But if you talk about nature-based solution, often there's many opportunities for community engagement, for people to come out to do planting, for instance, or 1 million trees program, or different organizations join us to do, say, mangroves planting, etc. So that's all part of that nature-based solution, and that kind of solution can scale, although it requires constant monitoring in that sense, because you never know how effective it is. You got to keep monitoring it and seeing how well the science and in a way, the response of the environment takes on to the solution. But it's a great way for the community to continue to engage in developing the solution and working with the whole site to see how it's working well.
So how many staff do we have at NParks?
Well, in NParks, we have about 1,300 staff.
Very good. And so we really need the whole community to be involved, right? Because
Yeah,
we have
for
more
sure.
trees than
For
staff.
sure. That's why the 1 million tree movement involves so many members of the community. It's a great program.
Great. And I really love the idea that we're actually looking at urban NbS. So what exactly is that?
Well, if you look at Singapore's city landscape, you see not just the tree along the roadside, but on the buildings as well. So over the years, we've really incorporated a lot of greening on the buildings to complement the additional greening of the parks and the roadside greening.
Very good. So I'm going to come to a very famous professor from SMU. All right, he's the famous one. Can we put our hands and thank you? All right. So, all right, and Professor Winston is actually representing our voice, all right, at the UN, and the IPCC is taking a lot of his time, but he still does lecture, and he oversees a couple of projects. So Winston, I'm going to tease you on this one. You're actually looking at a project about cooling Singapore, right?
Yes.
And so in spite of all the trees, the temperatures keep going up. And this week is really bad, all right? I think Gaga is hot, but our temperature is hotter, right? And Cotton On is actually very involved, all right, with Lady Gaga Foundation. So how can we do better in the cooling initiative? I know it's part of your passion. And why is it needed for Singapore? Because I think it's also related to our fertility rate.
Thanks, Annie, for embarrassing me, but well met on that. So many questions, and I'll try and answer them as succinctly and as concisely as possible. Following up on what Yuning says, you need urban nature-based solutions to complement the physical infrastructure, the design elements of a city, to magnify the cooling sort of regulatory, the cooling ecosystem service, the regulation that street trees, park spaces, and everything else provides. And these solutions work, I mean, in the IPCC from AR6 and before that, and in the current assessment cycle that I'm co-chairing and leading, we're placing a lot of emphasis on how case studies, how evidence from not just Singapore, but from everywhere else in cities around the world, but also in rural contexts. These nature-based solutions do work. Governments understand and they want to see what data there are, and then from the extraction of our assessment, they can implement that as policies that can help the business community, like Cotton On, magnify and enable the success and effectiveness of nature-based solutions. But coming back to Singapore, so we learned from my Cooling Singapore project that shade matters, and more importantly, it's not just the shade of street trees, but the scale of the green spaces that we have is critical. You can have a small field that is like 6 football fields in size. It can provide a little bit of cooling. But if you have a park like Bishan Ang Mo Kio Park that is 62 football fields in size, you can have significant cooling of more than 2 degrees within the park, as well as letting that extend out into the major residential areas in Ang Mo Kio and Bishan, and they can benefit from that as well. So how you enable that is think big. So we have, in order to think big, the other corollary is you need to combine, collaborate, partner in terms of academia, in terms of governments, and in terms of the corporates and the private sectors. We need to work together because time is running short. On that point, if I could add a little bit of a downer note, we are going past 1.5 degrees Celsius globally, past the Paris Agreement that was agreed upon 10 years ago. Sometime within the next 5 years, it's almost going to be a year-round above 1.5. The worrying thing is that the adaptation solutions from nature-based solutions there will be limits to how effective it can be. So while it does a good job of protecting us from climate risks, the physical risks that we have, that limitation, the effectiveness will get weaker and weaker the warmer we go. So we really need to, on top of scaling up the action, we need to take action fast.
Thank you very much. So the word is fast. There's an urgency. But I have a great question coming in that's asking about money, funding. All right, we want speed. We have the solutions available, but where's the money coming from? Let's start with Tim first. Sorry, Tim. All right, you're the one making the money on this panel. No, I'm just kidding. All right. I know that the business is very good, and then you have a foundation, yeah? So I'd really like to know, what is your organization's approach to funding all the initiatives in the environment through your store network? And then how does that align with the Cotton On Foundation's broader purpose?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, again, I probably alluded to this before a little bit, but yeah, we just believe in collective impact. So, when we can, you look at our stores right across the globe, okay? So it doesn't matter if you come into a store here in Suntec, across the road here, or whether it's in Melbourne, Australia, or in LA. The fact is, you're going to step into a store and you're going to meet one of our store attendants that is passionate about a local project. And they can tell you about the work that's going on. So it's real, it's tangible. And we talk to it in a really genuine way. And I think that's really important because, again, it breaks down the barriers, the stigma around this is too big. There's this conversation that needs to happen on a daily basis, and particularly for young people. So when we talk about money and fundraising, that's not the thing that drives us. We get that result if we do that part really well. So I think the opportunity to then work really closely with great organisations is so critical. So we've got obviously some great community partnerships around the world, but organisations like WWF-Singapore have made that tangibility possible. One of the key projects, and I'll use this as a very quick example, but one of the key projects in Sarawak, where actually some of our team visited recently, and we had WWF come and present at our offices in Singapore 2 days ago. It's incredible to see what happens when you really talk to that tangibility, talk to the reality of the project, but also talk about the goal and what we're really chasing, and breaking that down into a simpler form. Around the world, we even break it down so simple that if you buy a product, it plants a tree. So for a young person, they're already engaging in a simple action, but they can deep dive and find out more about projects that are closer to home. So I think it's about connection for me, whether that's from a customer right through to partners.
Very good. And can we put some numbers on it? So how big is your Cotton On Foundation, and how much funding do you need to raise for you to run a lot of the programs?
Yeah, I like to talk about momentum. When we started in 2007, we raised $140,000, and we spent that money straight away on humanitarian projects. Today, I mentioned before, every 2 seconds we have a contribution to the foundation. We just ticked over 200 million raised since 2007. The thing is, we've spent it all, and we've got a hell of a job in front of us to do more. So we believe that we can still raise another 200 million over the next 6 to 7 years. Again, momentum. We want to continue to drive forward for young people and to create a world where every young person can thrive.
Thank you very much. So Yuning, you also have to put up a budget every year, right? Hey, I'm a finance professor, so you have to allow me this question. And everything in Singapore, we have a plan, yeah? We don't have a task force all the time, but we do have a plan. So how are we getting close to the green plan? And what do you need from stakeholders for us to achieve the targets of the green plan?
Yeah, for sure, we need a lot of, like just now we're talking about how many people do we have in NParks, right? So we really need the community and the corporations to come on board and support us. Beyond the budget that we receive from government, actually we do get a lot of support from various organizations and individuals as well to support us in the work that we do, because some of the solution is still at the exploratory stage, like for instance, or seagrass research, or some of the mangrove projects that we do. So corporations coming in to support the funding that we have really brings that science much further on. Because nature-based solution, while we see a lot of potential, still the standardization is not entirely there. Still a lot of research needs to go into it. So we do need additional support to come in for that kind of research. Yep.
Very good. And I do know that NParks, you do consultation projects as well, right? So you have to earn your keep. Yeah, okay. So you see, that question from the audience is right smack here. I'm going to pose it to all of you, but maybe we'll start with you first. All right, Winston? So what innovative financing mechanisms can be leveraged to support and scale up nature-based solutions? All right, and I know none of you speaks on behalf of the financial sector. Except me, yeah, but I won't speak for them first. Okay, so how do we ensure that all the investments that are put into this space really do yield the economic returns as well as the social returns? And how do we ensure that it goes really to, you know, protect biodiversity? Is there any ideas from this panel?
That sounds like the previous week.
That sounds like a previous panel, is it? So,
No, the previous week when Ecosperity was in town.
any ideas? None? Tim, you want to venture?
I mean, to me, part
Maybe
of it is looking at the co-benefits that nature-based solutions can bring. Because beyond, say, coastal protection or enhancing biodiversity, we are also creating spaces for people to have activities to actually build their own health, etc. Because now social prescribing, especially walks in the parks, therapeutic gardening, etc., is really gaining momentum. And that, in terms of financing, you start to put dollars around that, really shows that a lot of these solutions are bringing benefits beyond just the biodiversity.
Very good. So you have to kind of do it yourself. So for you, Winston, just now at the breakout table, you asked me how honest can you be with this audience. Okay.
I'll try.
Okay. So I'm asking you this because we're all pulling in different directions. When Vivek first introduced the topic, the world looks like it's getting more and more fragmented, more and more nationalistic. So my question for you is there sufficient alignment of current policies, tools, and practices for us to realize the significant contribution that NbS can bring to the table?
Great question. Honestly, no, we're not. That said, we are getting a good start. There is momentum. Before Paris 10 years ago, the world was on course for a 3-4 degrees C world. With the agreement so far, we're down to about 2.7. That's before, shall we say, recent events in the White House. But that momentum will likely be stopped for a bit. But we need to continue on to get to 1.5 or to a world that, you know, averts the worst excesses or worst impacts of climate change. How can we do so? We need the start that Tim has alluded to in terms of getting young people involved, making it personal. The start that this Earth Summit that the WWF has convened in getting a lot of important stakeholders beyond just academia or governments or corporates together, bringing them into the same room, learning about what is important from the scientific perspective and also the financial perspective is critical. I remain an optimist, glass half full. I hope that it does happen. And the work that we all do together collectively, we need to amplify that much more than we are today because the uncertainty that we'll be facing over the next 2 years, no thanks to certain countries pulling out from certain agreements, that needs to be addressed by other stakeholders. But there's a lot of noise going on, but I believe the signal is still very strong for action.
Tim, anybody want to jump in with something optimistic?
No, I think I probably go back to the collective action piece again. We work with, I'll use one example, we work with a great organisation in Australia called Citizens of the Reef, and this is actually a really cool example in terms of really analysing what the issue is and getting to a solution. And so what they do is, it's something called citizen science. So they, essentially any tour operator that goes out on the reef, even if you're going out just to have a look at the reef, you take photos of the reef, you upload it to a platform, and then young people all around the world can assess the reef. They can, it's a very unique platform in terms of you can get on there, it's very simple, you can do it on your mobile phone, and you can assess the integrity of the reef. So all of this information bubbles up, and it tells you the most at-risk reefs. So from there you can deploy conservation efforts, which we are a part of. We actually fund some of the reef stars, which you might have seen on the film before. But that's essentially just rebuilding reefs in the most at-risk reef areas. But the cool thing is then there's also the training of First Nations individuals that actually work on the reef, on their country, on their sea. So they're passing on knowledge, passing on connection and seeing the reef revitalised as well. So, you're connecting community, you're connecting business, you're connecting, experts in the field, and it all comes together for a great result.
So how do they pitch to you when they have this portal set up? And how much money is that determined by a committee?
Well, it is really interesting. I think we try and find grassroots organisations and build up. Obviously, WWF-Singapore is not grassroots, but we typically look for the issue that we're faced with wherever we work in community and find a great organisation to work with and build up. And that was definitely Citizens of the Reef when we first connected with them.
Very good. And before I get to you, Ning, I actually want you to answer this, Vincent. So you are the science and the expert voice on this panel. So what types of nature-based solutions are currently seeing the highest demand in the market? And what key enablers are needed to scale them? Because from morning till now, we say we got great vision, great ideas, but we need the whole community to come on board. So scale is critical because that will bring down the cost.
So, in a word, I should have worn my green batik today because that's the answer. Green and blue. Let me qualify that. Thanks, Annie. In many cities, not just in Singapore, there's a constant push towards understanding and implementing green infrastructure at various scales, from community gardens, green walls, green roofs, to park connectors and large park spaces. That has tremendous benefits, co-benefits, including what Yuning has said. It doesn't just cool the environment, it prevents floods, it allows for community spaces to happen, more healthy population, and I haven't forgot, I was going to go into the cooling aspects that reduces the risk of low fertility among men. Some colleagues of mine have in the medicine school in NUS have done work showing that the extreme heat that we face leads to lower sperm counts among men. So there's a stronger impetus given the low total fertility rate in Singapore to make sure cooling measures that are nature-based can help with this particular risk.
The sustainability of Singapore is at stake.
Thanks, Annie. But let's not forget the sort of coastal, sort of blue infrastructure that also plays a significant role. We know that it works, but the challenges we face, and Yuning alluded to it, is that we lack data. And in our field, data are money. The value is in there. So in terms of furthering that understanding, much more research, much more collaboration to get that data would be very helpful to make not just a business case, but a greater sustainability case towards the importance of these nature-based solutions.
Thank you very much. I'm watching the clock, and there are no questions coming, so I'd like to get to the last two rounds, if I may. So I'm going to start with you, Tim. So how do you turn customer engagement? Right, you have about how many stores you were mentioning?
Yeah, 1,300 stores.
Okay, that's a lot. And so your retail-based fundraising is very meaningful, right? It has contributed to many of the examples, but you also went with selected partners. So what exactly do you do with the Lady Gaga Foundation?
Wow, that's off topic. No, I think, again, it's meeting young people where they're at. So if I'm going to answer that question, for me, it's more about understanding what young people are seeing today and what they're connected to. And through Born This Way Foundation is the name, we actually we fund grassroots mental health organisations that are nominated by young people. Okay, so we actually ask them, who are the organisations that are making a difference in your life? And so we allocated about 5 million Australian dollars to 65 organisations across the globe, some of them here in Singapore, and I know we have visitors from around the world, more than likely where you're from as well. But again, the key term is grassroots. So these are organisations that maybe are doing a little bit tough, especially coming through COVID, especially coming into the world that we see today. Funding is limited. So how can we help them build up to be able to do the vital services that they're born to do? And so the feedback already has been incredible. Like, we are now seeing over 400,000 young people impacted in the last 6 months. And these are young people who did not have access to the vital support that they need for their mental health. And we've got this saying at Cotton On, it's about putting someone side by side a young person. There's a disconnect from community that we're seeing in rapid form across the globe. So we were trying to bring community back to support young people. And it's an interesting question, because this is actually all connected. When we talk about the environment, we talk about green spaces, we talk about the mental health of someone. It's not as isolated as maybe what we think. So, yeah, I appreciate the question. Yeah.
And I noticed you have Cotton On Kids as well. So you keep saying young people, but you're also getting to the mindset of the children.
Yeah, well, I think the parents, like, they're the ones shopping. As a father of 4 boys, I know that when I walk into a Cotton On Kids store, it's they're grabbing everything as well off the rack. But it's also an interesting one from a motivation point of view. Parents know, again, that helplessness isn't just exclusive to young people. It's definitely for parents seeing their children grow up in a world that we see around us today.
Agreed. All right, so I keep worrying when you say young people, the young at heart included, yeah, and the parents are included. Just kidding. All right, now I'm coming to you, Yudim. So do you think regulatory mechanism needs to be in place and needs to be institutionalized for NbS to be successful?
Well, you can see from the success of the kind of urban green buildings that we have, that the regulatory component does come in to make a difference. So we're already coming into the 4th edition of the Landscape for Urban High-Rise Building Guidelines that URA has in place that requires buildings in key strategic areas to have a certain level of greening. And that, over time, has made quite a difference in, say, key areas like the CBD, Jurong, etc., that you see some of the buildings are really very green, the new generation of buildings. So regulation does have a strong place in making a difference, especially where the private sector comes in a lot, in this case, developments.
So I read from your bio, actually, that in your role previously at URA, you actually look at the 50-year horizon.
Yes.
Can countries plan for 50 years?
Well, the objective of looking at 50 years is not that anybody can crystal ball 50 years ahead, but it's really about setting our minds at the long-term horizon, looking at what are some of the challenges, and having that time horizon to think about what are the issues and how they could pan out, and know where do we stand as a nation, as a country in terms of our values, and what we hope to see as a vision, so that we can start moving towards it. Yep.
I love that statement. Yeah, you've spoken like a family-owned business. Singapore's not family-owned, all right? But we're actually looking long-term. We're actually looking long-term because every family in the country, all right, has stake in the future of the country. And therefore, you need to realize that vision. So, for you, Winston, you say NbS is very important, but many people are throwing all kinds of solutions at us. So how does it compare to like other forms of climate mitigation strategies, whether in terms of cost, effectiveness, and scalability?
Cost effectiveness and scalability in one important context, in terms of climate resilience and also in terms of development. We can't just have any solution or any sort of nature-based solution or physical infrastructure done just for climate protection alone. It needs to be part of a bigger story. And that's where the sort of community engagement, the long-term planning that has been mentioned is critical. You want to have it for that goal or that vision to make sure that you can develop a community, you can have protection for the long term. So in it by itself, I mean, relative to others, let's say seawalls versus seagrasses or air conditioning versus, green spaces, I don't see that as, in competition with each other. What's needed is the sort of partnerships from stakeholders, the regulation. So I'm glad you asked that question of Yuning, because she gave the best answer in terms of that. That regulation is to help funnel that sort of investment, that sort of capital towards where it's needed for the long term. So we need to stop thinking as competition between NbS versus others. They all are part of that same solution in building long-term resilience and in building the capacity for development that we want to see.
So in the last round, can I then ask you, before we go out to, the next panel, what do you have for the audience, right? A challenge and a possible solution. We start with you, Tim. All right.
A challenge.
What would you like to see from Cotton On perspective?
Well, I might say probably more a personal perspective. I've probably spoken about Cotton On quite a bit. I got given this beautiful turtle badge from the WWF team last night at dinner. And my 6-year-old, it's his favourite animal. So when I get home, he'll definitely steal this off me, there's no doubt. But, on a personal level, that's the motivation right there. Like, I don't want to stand there in 10 years, 20 years' time and tell my son who's 6 that I did nothing at this point in time. So it's the words that Paul left us with before. It's on all of us. It's something we all can take away and do something individually, but do something as businesses. Don't let this time pass us by. So that's it for me.
Very good. So to the challenge is make sure that you speak to every 6-year-old out there that you're actually building a better world, not for the today, but for them, for tomorrow. Yunin.
Well, I see the need to build understanding. We can all do action at a very basic level. Tree planting is a great way for everyone to get involved, but we also need people to deepen their understanding as well, which is why we have in place some of the programs like our Youth Stewards for Nature, where people come on board and work with us on the deeper issues so that they understand the challenges and we can start to co-create some of the potential solutions ahead. Yeah, so I think we need that kind of collective action and understanding.
Very good, yeah. So having the ambition and the aspiration is not enough. We need to turn it into action. You have the last word, Prof. Winston.
Thanks. 2 words, courage, and apologies for the Spanish speakers in the room, cojones. You need both. You want to take the lead. Right now, the world is very uncertain. There needs to be courage in leadership. There needs to be fortitude in what needs to be done to deal with the climate crisis. And I'm glad that this summit started off by talking about the crazy risks that we face. And we are oftentimes distracted by the short-term risks that we look into. So the WEF risk report that said that for the short-term risk, the number 1 is misinformation. If you go back the previous year, I believe it was geopolitical conflict. Before that was pandemics and so on and so forth. But if you look at the medium and the long-term risk, is consistently related to biodiversity, consistently related to extreme weather, consistently related to climate change. We cannot lose sight of that medium to long-term risk just because we're distracted by the noise that's going on around the world in the present day. So a lot of courage and cojones is needed to make sure that the leaders in this room can continue with the work that needs to be done.
Thank you, Vincent. This is a AAA panel, all right? Because Vincent actually talked about alignment of values, yeah? And the critical piece is, having courage, coherence, leadership, and that alignment of values need to be there. Then the aspiration will need to be leveraged on for it to turn into action. So thank you very much. Can we put our hands and thank my AAA panel? Very well done.
Thank you so much, Professor Annie, for leading the panel discussion and highlighting the triple benefits of nature-based solution. It's not just about the carbon sequestration, it's beyond that. I was just passing by the coffee area, and I saw that the choco chip cookies were missing, and the coffee is also limited. And I got reminded of my last trip to Laos, in which I was talking to some entrepreneurs, and they were telling me now they grow coffee which is shade-grown. So I asked them, why do you do shade-grown? They said, because of extreme weather conditions, the temperatures are rising, so the coffee production is moving up. So is our food bill. So I don't know if you have noticed, gradually our coffee prices are going up because that's the impact of climate change on coffee production in places like Laos or Vietnam. So I just got reminded on how real this issue is of climate change and food security in our own region, and of course the cost of living crisis.